Hi, you're listening to
The
Four
Four Takeaway Podcast.
where we talk about anything and everything on the menu from movies, music, gossip, news, etc. through the eyes of four rather weird individuals.
I'm Heiko.
I'm Hannah.
I'm Hamid,
I'm Yas.
and this episode is part 2 of Learning Through the Movement. Today, we give you updates, talk about privilege, and read your suggestions on how to help in this movement. Would you like that for dining?
Or for takeaway.
For takeaway.
Orders up.
Ding.
Ding ding.
All right. How are you guys?
Well, it's been a while, huh? It feels like the last recording session has been ages ago.
Yeah, when it's just like a week ago.
A week ago,
week.
exactly a week
Yeah,
ago.
yeah. It's
No,
been a rough week.
less than a week ago. It was 6 days ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So odd.
How are you guys feeling? I think the whole world is easing up on the quarantine and lockdown now, right?
Yeah, and I also think we feel like a lot has, like it's been a long time because so many things have been happening still day by
Yeah,
day.
day by day, right?
Right. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
probably what made this whole week feel longer than usual.
Yes.
Yeah, so as Kuya Hamid said, today is part 2 of learning through the movement, and we are going to give you updates. We're going to begin with giving you updates on how this movement and the protests, what resulted from it so far. And again, a lot has been happening day by day, so many. And the protests have been going on for about 2 weeks now, right?
Yep.
And the protests spark a lot of events. A lot. A lot of good, which is the goal, and unfortunately, a lot of bad too. So, I'm going to update everyone on some of the bad things and, more importantly, the good things that have come out of the protests. So, we have touched on part 1 that many people have been using the protests as an opportunity to loot and cause chaos.
Right.
And this margin of people, sad to say, is what most mainstream news sources have been focusing on to create like this image that the protests do nothing but damage and they're not really doing any good.
Yeah.
That's sad, isn't it? Why
It
would
is.
it just is really telling, and it shows how media there or media anywhere would want to shape everything.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, aside from that, a lot of influencers are treating these protests like a photo op.
Oh, we were
my
just talking about
God.
that a
Yep.
few days
What?
ago. Where?
Yes. So you haven't seen that, Kuya? So a lot of influencers, quote influencers, are going to the protests all dressed up. You
With
know,
their yoga
they're looking
pants
for
and
or like a gown.
what?
Yes, a
What?
gown.
Oh my
and,
God.
and they would ask for someone or make their own sign of the BLM, you know, just make a
Uh-huh.
sign.
Mhm.
And they would just take pictures or videos or anything, just be there for the photo opportunity
Yeah, and
and
as
go
soon
back.
as the
Cloud.
picture is
Cloud.
done, they would get into their car and drive home.
Exactly.
Yeah,
There's
I-
this
Damn.
Yeah,
Are you-
Yasin showed me one instance where this lady was trying to
drill.
have,
Oh, I saw
Oh,
her
it
too.
was a
Did you
drill?
show me that?
Yeah.
yeah,
Where she
yeah,
was
a
just-
drill. She was trying to
yeah,
drill the wall,
reporter.
and then she then said thank you to the guy who was actually doing it. And right after, oh, thank you so much, because her boyfriend was taking a picture of her. And after the picture was taken, she just went into the car with her boyfriend and drove off, and that's it.
And I love the person, like the people watching her. They were
Yeah.
like, "Oh, good
Wow.
job, guys! BLM, good job."
And wasn't there a YouTuber who was kind of caught into
Arrested?
the what?
So
Yep.
yeah,
Jake-
you're talking
Jake
about
Paul.
Jake
It was
Paul.
Jake Paul,
Back at
right?
it
Who was part
again
of a
with-
looting activity.
Allegedly,
Allegedly.
he didn't actually loot or like cause a lot of damage, but he was there just for the to use this as like
For the clout.
content,
Yeah.
clickbait
Mm.
content.
Yeah. Well, we are not entirely, I mean, not to judge. I'm kidding.
Not to judge, but judging Jake Paul.
Yeah, but And we are not anyone who could just say, "Oh yeah, you're doing it because of your content," or "Yes, you're doing that without any hint of sincerity." But
Knowing
when you watch the videos and when you see for yourself, you don't need any explanation. It's right there in front of you. So it's really hard to say otherwise.
and with the history of what Jake Paul has been
Yeah.
doing, aside from that, also there have been cases from around the world where young people, mostly young people, but not exclusively young people, they've been using the death of George Floyd like as a joke, and they imitate the scene to make fun of it.
Oh God, yeah.
And they post pictures on Snapchat everywhere.
Oh yeah, I saw that one.
It's like this new challenge or trend.
Yeah, that's just
How does your brain work to be able to do something like that?
yeah. What
Wait.
kind of person are you?
Didn't they call that
For you.
that George Floyd challenge where they reenact
Yes.
this whole scene? What's the
Yeah,
background?
yeah.
Is that's not to spread awareness? That's
Well,
No, no, no,
Why,
no, no.
why is there a backpack challenge?
what's the backpack challenge?
What's the backpack?
What's
You know, the one in schools where they just throw out their backpacks.
Oh, to a person.
Yeah, was it?
Yeah,
I can't
something-
remember.
yeah, yeah.
Was
What is that
okay,
for?
okay.
What
It's
is
like
the
a gauntlet
Or the
of
Tide
multiple
Pod
people,
challenge.
and then you have to run through them
Yeah.
while they're throwing
Yeah.
backpacks
Yeah,
at
yeah.
you.
Did they maybe only have that at your
I mean,
school?
that's like another thing. That's a whole other thing. But doing
No,
imitating the scene of the death of George Floyd and smiling and doing thumbs up while doing so, that's a whole other level.
of insanity and stupidity? Yes.
And ignorance and
Insincerity.
yes.
Immaturity.
Wow.
And more on this in the good news, though. I'm gonna be going back to this.
It also kind of reminded me of that. You remember when Syrian refugees were fleeing Syria,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and then there was this boy who drowned on the beach
Yeah.
wearing the red shirt. He was face down on the beach
Yeah.
sands,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and then people started doing that too.
Oh wow.
Wow, I did not know that.
They lie prone on the beach.
I guess people are
Some
just
sort of challenge.
there are people like that, no? Okay. So with this, with all of this, I mean, these aren't the only things that have been happening that are, straying the goal, straying away from the goal of the protests. But with this, a lot of good things have come from the protests. I mean, it is the goal. And so far, I'm going to give you some and a little of the things that have been happening. First, the protests have gone worldwide.
Yes.
Which is
and-
good over here in Germany.
Which is really good. And
Also.
the voices of everyone around the world are for this. They want to eradicate this everywhere. That's really good. Some people that made fun of George Floyd that I was talking about, the challenge thing. Some of them, not all, but it's good that some of them have been either expelled or not accepted in their colleges.
yes.
I think
Yep.
that is just the proper
Mm-hmm.
answer
Yeah.
to the proper
Awesome.
consequence, I mean.
It's satisfying.
Yes.
Another one is a lot of money has been raised for many donations, like the bail fund, donations to the victims, the ones affected, and to the NAACP.
Yeah.
That's really good. A lot by celebrities and people around the world donating, and a lot of people using their platforms too.
And signing petitions as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another, it's recent too, is that a lot of statues and monuments in the USA of people that have, contributed to the racist
Slavery.
system of the government, they have been destroyed and, taken down, which is really nice.
And-
Because,
yeah,
I mean,
go
it's a
on.
matter of time.
And it's not just in the US.
Yeah, everywhere.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm
People
surprised.
are actually defending it,
Huh?
which is concerning. There are a lot of people who actually defend.
Yes.
I mean, are against.
Oh,
the
yeah.
taking down of these statues.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think that it's great that it happened now, but I'm surprised that it happened sooner. Like, why just now? These statues,
Yeah,
But
but
I'm happy.
Hamad was talking about how people would say why would be
Would be against taking
yeah would
down
be
these
Yeah,
against
statues.
taking
but-
down.
They're the same people who probably say all lives matter. So another,
Yeah, or there are just some few
Probably.
bad apples.
Yeah. Oh no!
Ugh.
Stop it. Okay.
Oh, I'm not
Another
going to stop.
is-
I'm going to start on that later, but
Oh yeah.
as a
Okay.
little foreshadowing.
Do
I'm
so.
sorry.
Yeah. For now, stop, but later go off. So the next one,
Save it.
another one is the 4 officers that were responsible for George Floyd's death. They have been fired and charged, which is
Good.
really good.
Have they been detained?
But I wasn't able to read on that. I know that Chauvin, the one who
Mm-hmm. With second
really-
degree.
Yeah, he was prosecuted with second degree.
The
How about the 3?
The 3 other officers were charged with, what do you call that? When you are a blah blah to the leader.
Accomplice.
Something like that. But however, there's something else that we should talk about too, but just really quickly. Not to go back to something bad, but we have to, is that one of the police officers, one of the 4 named Thomas Lane,
Yes.
he was charged, with being an accessory to murder.
The
Is
crime?
that yeah?
I
Accessory
think
to the crime? Is
so.
that what you call it? He is free now because he posted
What?
bail of
What?
$750,000.
But that's
And
just bail.
that's bail, and he used crowdfunding
Yes.
to do so.
I just read about
Wait,
that.
where
too.
did he?
Oh my god.
What?
He put up a crowdfunding. Okay, this is according to
Dude.
This is according to Star Tribune, and they reported this, but I haven't, I tried to dig, but the first report was from Star Tribune that he opened up a crowdfunding site for people to donate for his bail.
But wait, is this confirmed other than Star Tribune?
Star Tribune,
Because-
CNN,
Oh,
NY
okay.
Post have been talking about it.
Oh wow.
Yep. And the people who donate, what?
Wait, I just want to ask, did he make this crowdfunding in his name that people actually know
Yeah.
that they're
It's for his
donating
bail.
for him?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
I mean, I'm not even surprised anymore.
Yeah, you could be
True.
surprised by that.
Well, it's a
Let's move on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a good thing I read about that before, because if I had only just known that from you, I would have just probably punched my monitor here.
Yeah.
This is just
it's
appalling.
it's so maddening.
I haven't really listened or read or watched anything for about 2 days now because I'm on hiatus. I'm taking a break from social media and the news right now because everything's just maddening, and sometimes you really have to take time for yourself.
True.
So yeah, but hearing this now, it's just
Yeah.
We're right back at it.
You should
You're
have
right.
made like Heiko and read it before read
Yes.
more stuff before, so you wouldn't get mad right now.
yeah.
Just get all the
So,
bad stuff on your
with-
plate and then get over with, and then take
Yeah.
a 7-day
So
hiatus.
it could have been digested beforehand. So aside from the people responsible for George Floyd's death, a judge ruled that there was probable cause to try the 3 white men that were in murder charges for the death of Ahmaud Arbery.
Did we talk
But
about
are they
that?
already charged?
I think it's still on process right now.
Okay, that's good. But that's good.
But the judge ruled that there was probable cause.
Okay.
So that's really good.
Did we talk about the Ahmed Arbery case last time?
We didn't.
Not yet.
We mentioned them, but we
Yeah.
didn't get into it. you
Okay.
know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Ahmad
Ahmad.
is another victim of police brutality
Yeah.
with
Oh dear.
like George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. These are just some of many
Yeah.
victims.
And moving to Breonna, so far the people responsible for her death have not been charged with anything.
Yeah.
However, there's a law called Breonna's Law, and it has
Yes.
been passed to regulate no-knock warrants for narcotics cases. Because right now, like, you can just if someone is projected to be involved with narcotics or anything like that, they
You can get a warrant and just barge in
into
straight
the
in your
So there
in one's home.
and for in Breonna's case, it was so freaking sad, and I'm so angry.
Yes.
Because it was the wrong house, and they killed her.
Yes. Yeah.
Like,
And she
Yeah.
wasn't even
And
the one who
she's so
was
innocent.
defending herself, right? Because it was her boyfriend, and then she herself
Yeah.
got shot in the ensuing struggle.
8 times.
Oh,
8 times.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she's a frontliner, and she helped a lot with COVID victims, and she just
It's
yeah,
sad.
it's a sad story.
These stories are just so crazy and makes you so mad. But yeah, at least for now, small steps. There's a law called Brianna's Law again to regulate the no-knock warrants.
Okay, good.
Little steps, but
Well, you know there are going to be
at
people
least
who are
there
going
are
to be like,
steps.
"Hey, if she was innocent, why did she live there then? Why didn't she move to a better neighborhood?"
Most probably, that would probably be the argument of people. People would have arguments like that.
They'd also be like, "Then why did her boyfriend defend himself if they were innocent?"
Yeah. Okay. Whew, okay. I meant to mention all these good things so that we would be like relieved, but
Oh, you can.
No, I hate
You
them
can
now.
see how
But
tense we
because
all are now. That worked out
I
well.
mean, I
Sorry.
mean, it's good that these are happening, but then if you think about it, what took so long for these things to
Exactly.
happen?
And this is that's such a good transition to what I wanted to say.
Okay.
'Cause I was about to say, a lot of people have been saying that protest peacefully, man. If you wanna if you wanna create peace between the
They
police
have
and eradicate racism, protest peacefully. But how many decades or centuries even uh, have
I mean,
they
your
been?
country was built on a revolution. What are you talking about?
Yes. And if the only way for it to happen is this, I don't blame the people that are angry and could cause some violence, because riots have been happening not only for this movement. Riots have been happening to open up so many things that are open right now, like the Stonewall
Yeah.
riots. What else? The riots in the 60s.
Right.
The Los Angeles riots, where do you know those things about the roof Koreans?
Yeah, they're coming back.
Yeah, that was like cool. But yeah. So no, don't blame them for being this angry now.
And what happened to them? I mean, if you're telling them, why are you so mad? Well, I think one day would not even be enough to explain to you why they are mad.
True.
So yeah, so many things have been happening day by day. So I recommend, if you still want to be updated, look around, search, and a great source is Philip DeFranco, very good source for news every day.
Sean King.
Sean King, yeah, inform yourself. Those are some bad things and some really, really good things that have been coming out of these protests. So now that you are updated, and also to continue to learn through this movement, Heiko is going to lead a conversation on privilege, how to use it for good, and how it is present in a lot of people, maybe even you listening right now.
Wow, those are a lot of requirements. Oh, I can feel the pressure. People.
No pressure.
So as you can see, I prepared some notes, and the last times I did that, usually the discussion would go a different way, and that's totally fine. That's what we're here for. So let me just start with that and walk down this road with you two, with you three, and see where it leads us. Okay, what I wanted to talk to you about, of course, privilege, like you said. When we talk about privilege, I think the very first thing we would have to do would be to draw a line, like a distinction between what you can see as social privilege, what we are talking or what we've been talking about lately, and the privilege in law. And those are actually very different in a very important way. Like in law, you can earn your privilege, right? And it's conditional, so you can get a driver's license, and once you mess up as a driver of a car or whatever, it can be revoked.
Right. So if you get a license, that's one of your privileges.
Right. And you
According
work
to law.
for it, and everyone knows that's a privilege. It's like obvious for everyone. I'm trying to point out
You're
all
right.
the differences between that and the social privilege, which is what, like I said, what we've been talking about lately, and what is usually so deeply embedded in our system that it's mostly like obscured and veiled, like special advantages that depend on your cultural environment, that are based on skin color, ability, disabilities, sexual orientation, religion, and so on. And usually privileges of a certain group come always at the expense of another group, like when we apply it to Black Lives Matter movement. It's super obvious.
Yeah.
And what's coming up now and what is being discussed more and more, which is also a good thing, would be our white privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be advantages you have, not just in the USA, but in the entire world right now, that you have just because you're born with a white or light skin. Most obvious example right now, which is why people are going on the streets and protesting and rioting, would be applied to the situation with the police in the USA.
Yep.
Because as a white person, you enjoy that privilege of knowing that the police is your friend. That's the first thing. If a police car shows up and you hear the sirens, you can think or you can be convinced that everything is going to be okay because they're your friend and helper. That's what you get as a white person. As a black person, that's a totally different feeling or totally different sensation that you get when you hear a siren coming up and a police car pull over. I'll talk about this in a minute. And what else? If you know, privilege would also be if you know that if you comply in a police situation, you know you'll be fine. That's
Yeah.
also something that not everyone can hope for. Like in this situation, George Floyd, he was complying. We all saw that on the
Yes.
video that was going around. And he still didn't make it out of there alive. So-
Or you don't even have the chance to comply or to not comply.
Right, because
Sometimes they
all
just
those
see you
commands are being
and-
shouted at you. That
Sometimes you're not even given enough time to even
Process.
what you call it, process. Yeah, what's being said
Yeah.
to you, and you've already been getting riddled with bullets.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I mean, if police is talking to you, if there's a situation happening, that's already enough reason for you to be tense, to be
Right.
to be under pressure. And if someone's yelling all those commands,
Yeah.
get down, hands up, do this, do that, I think it's only
You can't expect the other person to be calm when you're shouting at them to calm down.
yeah. No one ever in
Yeah.
the history of calming down has ever successfully calmed down after being told to calm down
Told to.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's basically no need as a white person that you have to fear an ordinary encounter with the police, but as a African American person, those always can potentially be deadly, and this is where white privilege right now is becoming blatantly obvious, not just in
Or
the
even
George
just
Floyd
black,
case,
not just African American, right?
or well, and I've been watching some My Stories videos on YouTube. I think the one that made the most impression on me was by a channel called FBE, and it's called My Stories, and it's a video where black people in the U.S. Talk about their encounters, not just with the police, but with all kinds of people and how they've been discriminated against in like
Yeah.
super everyday normal situations even. And there's another thing that most apparently in a lot of households happens that a white person could never understand. Like you don't have to talk with your parents about how you have to be extra nice about the police or around the police and extra careful.
Right.
That when you get pulled over, it's always a safe thing to always say, yes, sir, thank you, sir, and always have a copy of your license and everything you need already at the,
Glove box.
not even in the glove
No,
box,
the
like
thing.
next to your wheel. So-
Dashboard.
on the dashboard, right, thank you.
Yeah, the dashboard.
So you don't make the impression that you're reaching for a weapon, right?
Yeah.
I read about that case where a black person has been pulled over and asked to get his license and the papers. And as he was reaching for his license and the papers in a glove box, was already threatened with a gun because apparently he,
Yeah.
or in the eyes of the
Was
police
trying to
officer, he was reaching for a weapon. So that's
Right.
insane. And that this, of course, reveals the fact that black people have to be taught that from an early age.
Right.
The talk,
yeah.
the talk for white people is the talk is always about like sexual educations, but the talk
The birds and the bees.
is about how you know you can be safe around police by being extra nice
Yes.
as in a black family. And
There's
And there's this one, there's a video where it was a child and a dad being interviewed, and then they asked the child what the father or the parents taught her, and she was reciting the script where I am blah blah years old, and
And I have nothing to harm you or
I have
threaten you
nothing
with.
to harm you. I'm not holding anything that is dangerous, and blah blah blah. And for this kid, she was just like 8 or younger even.
Yeah.
She was tiny.
And there's
yeah.
another video on this dad that taught his son how to breathe or how to survive being or having a knee on your nape, on the back of your neck.
Oh, that's scary. It's so scary.
Yeah.
Very.
Did you see that video where the LAPD shows up to because they're being called to attend or help with a looting situation, and they show up and immediately put the store owners on handcuffs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then some
What?
witnesses are saying that they're not the ones they should be restraining because they're the owners.
Yeah,
The looters are actually running away right now, but
right.
To no avail.
yeah.
Yeah, white privilege. White privilege also would mean to not even need a movement when no activism is needed.
Yes.
So I think Hannah once asked me how in Germany sometimes there's racism, or how white people are. What was that? How white people are perceived? And then I told you that white people are sometimes called, or Germans are sometimes called Kartoffeln, like potatoes,
Potatoes.
which is
Oh,
somewhat of a racial slur, but doesn't even come close to that kind of racism that affects the marginalized people everywhere to a degree that it really makes their lives so much worse.
Yeah.
I mean, if people call me potato, that's okay because I know I'm good.
Right. And like what are things that you say to white people about they can't follow a beat, for example?
They're
Yeah.
These are just white stereotypes, though.
Right.
It's not anything that could harm them, or be. It's not even close to what the black community, for example, is experiencing, and that's
It's certainly not enough to justify like a movement.
like the anti-Karen movement.
Oh,
yeah,
my
or
God.
the movement of opening up the state again.
Yeah. Did you read about this one lady who argued that the
Karen is a racial,
racial
slur,
slur and it's equally bad as bad as the N-word?
as the word.
Yeah, I saw that.
oh
And
really?
It's the N-word of the new
Crazy.
age or
Well,
something
I shouldn't
like
go
that.
into
Wow.
that deeply because I don't have a source for you right now.
Yeah, but Yasin is just about to talk about. The difference. There's like he showed me a picture or a video of the difference between the protests going on when they wanted to end quarantine or the lockdown versus
the protest
the
of
protest
the BLM movement.
for the BLM movement.
That
just
actually
recently.
matters, to be frank.
Yeah, okay. In the protests of that, briefly, they were armed. They were violent.
The white
they
people were
yeah,
armed.
white people were armed. They were violent. They were up in the faces of the police officers, touching them, and the police officers were like, "Okay, calm down. Everything, calm
They
down." calm
didn't
down,
even
calm down."
have pepper spray. They didn't have tasers. They
Yeah.
didn't have guns with rubber bullets. They didn't
Yeah.
have
batons.
batons. They didn't have
Batons.
anything. It was just their uniform and a mask, and they were just kind of like they weren't even
These
pushing
people were
away.
armed.
Yeah, but
A lot of them were armed.
yeah, and there was even an article, I can't remember from where. They put two pictures together, one showing different protest signs of those people who wanted to open up this U.S. again. I mean, remove lockdown, and those people who are protesting for the BLM, and it's just way different. Like, I wanna have a
I want a
haircut. I wanna
haircut.
enjoy a haircut.
Oh my God!
And then
yes,
the other
that
side would
happened.
be I can't breathe.
Yeah.
Fudge.
Privilege.
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's peak
Before
privilege.
we, huh?
peak privilege.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Before we go on and before I deliver my little PSA to you, or well, to everyone, actually, just wanted to digress a little, talk about professional privilege. Professional privilege, by the way, when you are in a certain professional position that you enjoy a privilege that's connected to your education, like when you're a doctor, a professor, or something, is hugely getting out of hand now when you look at the police because, professional privilege as a police person, policeman, policewoman, even if you mess up grossly, like those gentlemen in the George Floyd case, it's super hard to get someone charged and to detain someone. And as soon as you charge them, they're out on bail, as we can see. This is where professional privilege is showing, and where it's apparent that there's a huge flaw in this system.
Yeah.
Like there are a lot of people who actually defend those the police and their way of acting by saying that they're really just a few bad apples.
And
And those are just isolated events.
yes, and they may be good as a person, but we're not being against the people here. We're being against the system that
Right.
enables this racist way of treating society.
This neglectful way or negligent way, no? Right? And bad apples, I mean, we're talking about a profession where there are no bad apples allowed at all.
Exactly.
Right.
So as soon as they're bad apples, I mean, police people or the police has that privilege of being excused as having bad apples when they actually shouldn't
well, there
be any.
shouldn't be.
There
Right.
shouldn't be, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You
I
don't
saw
hear
this.
that about doctors.
I saw this comment where they say if you're a medical doctor, if you're a surgeon, if you mess up,
Yeah,
You're done.
out.
Done.
You're done.
You're done.
You're done.
Exactly.
right? Then why, if you're a policeman, if you mess up,
Oh, there's just few of them.
yeah.
Yeah.
What does
Or
that
like-
say
That
about
medical surgeon is not just a bad apple that you could excuse.
Yeah.
Or like a
He's
firefighter.
gone. Right.
Imagine a firefighter screws up and the entire house burns down, and you want to sue him and charge them, and they're just saying, okay, no, well, he likes to put down fires. We all do. But that was just a bad apple. I'm sorry, can't do anything. Damn, son. So yeah, that was just my little entry on professional privilege. I didn't really know where to include that, so I just put it in there somewhere. But that's just like the secondary point. We're still talking about white privilege, and I think what's important here, because I know a lot of people, or I feel a lot of people are offended when they're confronted with that concept of white privilege, because it has that air of accusation with it.
Yeah.
Right.
It comes with accusation of racism and discrimination and all that. And I think it's super important to understand that being privileged doesn't mean you're evil. It's just that responsibility that you have to look at yourself and see where your
Yes,
blind spots are, right? And as a,
Exactly.
Yeah.
it's not an accusation of racism, but more like a pointer that you should really take a look at yourself, realize in what ways you're benefiting just from the color of your skin.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And this applies to everybody, not just people who are white, but also people who are not black.
Yeah.
And yeah, right, not just the color of your skin. Well, that's all true too, but not just the color of your skin, but those things that make you benefit from the system around you.
Right.
Like
exactly.
if you're straight, or if you belong to a certain religion, that's the state that happens to be the state religion.
Yes,
If you're
yes.
male in a male-dominated society, this and that, and all these things.
If you were local.
Yeah, but
It's-
all things preceded by the first thing you see, which is the color of your skin. Because some
True.
people wouldn't get to the point that they would be asked what their religion is, or what their sexual orientation is, or what their beliefs are, just because they're already shut out because of the color of their skin.
And I think it's not
Yeah.
just the color of the skin, it's two things, the color of the skin and how you look like. Because, like, sometimes, even if you were white, but if you look Arab, that's already something.
You're brown.
If you have like facial, thick facial hair, you'd have to shave before you go to the airport because you're worried that you might just be stopped for a bit.
You're going to get
Yeah.
randomly selected for a search.
Hold on, I'm about to be randomly selected. Yeah. So, well, what I wanted to end with is just by saying that white privilege is a thing. It's not an accusation, but not just and not a reason to wail in guilt. It's not something that people should take as an insult. It's a cue, like I said, to reflect, see in what ways you're benefiting from things you didn't earn by yourself. And right now, we have to realize that we're living in this skewed system where the Western world, or most of the world, was built by white men for white men, and dismantling this imbalanced, unjust, highly skewed system takes time, takes reflecting. That can hurt, especially those who are in those privileged positions. Yeah, we all have bias, we have blind spots. Understanding who's being mistreated right now in the system, that would be the first step. And it's not
Yep.
always going to be easy.
Yeah, and I like what you said when you talked about just facing and accepting the fact that you have privileges that you did not work for, that were just there because of the color of your skin, because of the place that you were born in,
Right.
because of how you look like. You already have those privileges, which means you're already like 10 steps ahead of others. And as much as it is difficult to embrace, you have to, because it's not about again, like you said, it's not about trying to insult you. It's just people asking you to take responsibility for that privilege that you have.
And using it to help people.
Yes,
Oh,
who
yeah.
are less
Yeah.
privileged.
Yeah, that would be the call to action. I mean, the second step after realizing how you're privileged would be to know and think about how you can use that
Right.
to help the less privileged people around you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's going to be quite difficult, but then I think the world, it's in the right time now that we start doing so. We start doing
And
that.
I'm surprised it happened this late. Like,
Yeah.
I'm so happy that everyone's on board right now, but it's like.
But
matter
the
of
thing
time.
is, when you say everyone, it's still not everyone.
Oh, yeah.
There are
A
still
lot of
people.
people. I mean,
there
a lot of
are a
people.
lot of people who still do not embrace their privilege. I mean, not embrace, but accept. And there are people who are also who also think that, okay, I'll just be on the sidelines because it's a lot easier. I'll live my life, post my selfies, travel the world because I can, and I'll just not talk about these political things. I'll just
Yeah.
not talk about the societal problems because it's easier. And I can't do anything about it anyway. It's not going to change if I do something. Well,
Right.
it is going to do something.
That's the worst mentality.
Your voice and just a little bit of changing your perspective would change something, because
Yeah.
when you have your own family, that perspective that you have will be passed on to generations and generations.
Right.
And by changing your perspective, you're already helping.
Right.
You don't have to make thousands of dollars of donations, or you don't have to make a speech in front of people or protest and use war to help.
Using
know?
your privileged voice is enough.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you so much, Heiko, for that, on leading the conversation on privilege and making it really clear that it is a thing and it is something that we should accept and reflect on. And from that, learning and looking into ourselves, that's one of many things that people have been telling us, because last week we asked you listeners what things you suggest to do to further educate yourselves on this, and also what things you have been doing to help for this movement. You have given us really, really good suggestions from around the world, so let's get into them.
Okay, so we are going to read some of your suggestions that we got from Instagram and Facebook. We asked you what you could do to educate yourself and how you think you could inspire others to learn about issues like racism, privilege, equality, etc. Okay, the first one is Hanan from Saudi Arabia. She said, I do my best to sign any petitions I can, post about them, and try and be as aware as I possibly can be about the situation and what I can do to better myself as a human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very simple thing to do, but it's a
Yeah.
very helpful thing to do.
Yeah, because if you, let's say, if you don't have a job and you don't yet have an income, signing petitions would really help.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the right
And I
ones.
like yeah, the right petition.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I like what she said about doing to what I can do to better myself as a human, and that's
Yeah.
always the most important thing. Looking
Start with
inside
you.
you to start the change, right?
Mariam from Egypt says, with all things happening, I've noticed that a lot of people deny that this discrimination has been going on for so long in the places that they live in or the communities they're in. Admitting that it has been going on for so long, in my opinion, is one of the most important ways to start eradicating it.
Yeah.
Right.
It has been normalized in the news, the media, movies, and TV shows, even here in Egypt, for so long that people think it's the normal way of going about things. My country has a great diversity, and just like any other place, it's had its fair share of all the racism. And the fact that whenever it takes place, people just pretend that they don't see it or walk away like it's nothing important infuriates me. I've stood up to a lot of people on different social media platforms that I've seen across that line. I'm trying, but I need the rest of the people to do so too.
Wow.
That's one super difficult thing, that as soon as people don't remember a certain, or don't remember the start of a certain value because they're too young, they would say it's just the natural way of doing things.
Yes, it's the normal thing.
Yeah.
And she said admitting
Yeah.
that it has been going on is one of the things that she could do.
and
which is
I
really
like
true.
the part where she talks about there are places, there are communities where they deny that it is happening there, and therefore we should not be involved. That is a very good thing to kind of put into everyone's face, that
Yeah.
it's impossible that these kind of issues are not happening in your community.
And
Right.
yeah, and she also mentioned that she's standing up to a lot of people online and starting conversations with people online, but she also wants to spread that and make people do the same.
Because that's very difficult
It's
to do.
very,
It's
very.
very hard to just put up the courage to comment
Mm-hmm.
and
Or talk to people
yeah.
and
Well, and people
yeah.
do get defensive when it comes to justifying their laziness or staying with the status quo because it's convenient.
It's also the bystander syndrome. Is that what
Exactly.
they call it?
Yeah.
Bystander effect, I think.
Yeah,
Bystander effect.
something like that.
Something like that, yeah. But although we find out years later that it wasn't,
wasn't
actually true.
true.
But
But
still,
it
the effect is
happens.
there, the syndrome is
effect,
there. Yeah.
Okay, this one is from Shahad. She's from Saudi Arabia. And she says, if I happen to accidentally offend someone, I will apologize and ask why they are offended, so I better myself for future encounters. Which,
That's also a very difficult thing to do, actually.
Yeah.
yeah,
Because now the mentality online is, oh, you're offended, so what?
right.
And
that's when
just
the
to
discussion
apologize,
ends.
and yeah, and there's one way, or it's one thing to say sorry, to apologize, but it's a whole other thing to ask why someone is offended.
Exactly, yeah.
And
Right.
that's important. That's a good thing.
Just be cautious, of the things you say.
Mm-hmm.
Next up is Afnan from the UK. She says, I myself come from a non-white background. Even though people know what it's like to face discrimination based on color, people close to me still participate in being discriminatory toward people in the black community, especially with colorism. Being dark in my country is highly looked down on, which is, I think, a big issue in itself. And I think people like me and the youth and the younger generation are more woke. So I think we can start eradicating these things from our community first. Also, by having conversations with our families on the dinner table, they're going to disagree at first, but eventually they're going to have to think the way we think. That is if we have a conversation. If we never bring these things up with them, we can't change things at all. That's what I've been doing, is having conversations with my family. I've showed them videos of the blatant racial injustice all over the world, and so far they've been pretty supportive. To be honest, if I didn't start opening up these topics with them, I don't think it would have happened.
Starting conversations like that on the dinner table is not, would you say, like a normal thing to do for a lot of families, especially in this day and age.
Yeah.
Because right now, children and parents would always just have their own thing to do, especially with internet now and streaming and all these devices. But growing up in our family, I'd say we're very fortunate.
Yeah, because it's
Because-
very encouraged for us to always talk and everything
And
that's
debate
happening.
and
Yes.
And argue and
Yeah.
have really deep conversations on the table.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
dad would always want to have that one time, either lunch or dinner, just to sit down
Together.
together and
Yeah.
talk about issues.
And that's really good that you open these things up
Mm-hmm.
with them because they have different views and you're lucky enough to know these things that are going on because of, social media, and it's
Yeah.
important to bring that to them.
Yeah.
And something she said about in her country there's this discrimination on colorism and such.
Mhm.
We relate to that as well because in the
in the Philippines,
our brown skin, our natural brown skin is also
Considered-
considered unattractive or something like that.
yeah, and that's why when you go, I think Heiko has seen this when he went to the Philippines to visit. When you go in a store or in a pharmacy or something like that, a department store, there would always be rows and rows of whitening lotion, whitening
Whitening soap.
soap, and
Yeah.
all that. Where
And the commercials on TV are always like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Make your skin lighter. And this is also something she said to me personally was that these things are also normal in her country. Like the
Right.
commercials and such to lighten your skin because it's fairer and more attractive.
yeah, fair and lovely.
Yeah.
That's in here in Saudi Arabia. Fair and
Originated
lovely.
in South Asia.
Really, I didn't know that. Here in Saudi Arabia and in the Middle East, that's also a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Just being fairer. Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, the whiter you are, the more attractive you are. That's
Agreed.
the thought. All right. So Mia from the Philippines, she recommended the app called Blinkist, and I tried this a couple of days ago, and it's very nice. It's an app where what they do is they get the key highlights of a certain book
Mm-hmm.
and shrink it into, let's say, 4 short audio notes, at least 15 minutes or less of audio notes that you could listen to or read as well. So it's good because you will have these really good books that you won't have enough time to read, maybe, or maybe you're not sure if you want to get the book and you just want to know the key highlights of it.
Is this app for free?
There's a free version, but you could also purchase a subscription
version.
so that you could get access to all the books that they have.
Gotcha.
So it's a very cool thing because especially if we're in this time and age, we're all so busy. So I tried this like while going for a run or working out. I'm more into these now, like podcasts and stuff,
Than music.
than music. I don't know. I think I'm just adulting.
Well,
So
it's-
yeah, using that app for the to educate ourselves on this movement. That's
yeah,
really cool.
Yeah, and right now they're featuring books on racism and featuring the BLM community as well.
Nice.
So that's very good.
And another good thing about that would be that usually, or not usually, but often those books would be written in this academic lingo that it's really
Yes.
complicated and that it really deters people from actually engaging with them.
Exactly.
So breaking them down into those 15-minute bits can facilitate the access or facilitate reading all that and
Exactly.
and engaging with that.
That's so helpful because sometimes someone would have that spur of confidence to be like, okay, I'm going to educate myself right now and read this book.
Yeah.
Then they're bombarded by these
All
stuff
all
that-
those different super complex terms, racism, stereotype, xenophobia, and all that. Yeah, and breaking them down
And
can
they're just
actually
like-
help this time. In this case,
They're like, I tried and I didn't understand anything. So this is something really helpful.
yeah.
Right.
So Yusuf reaches out to us from the US. He says, being on the ground here, I can say the most profound way to inspire education on racial matters is to get people to recognize the stakes that they hold. Once the stakeholders recognize their role and the influence that comes with it, then they start to realize and understand their own self-worth. What I meant by that is that racial minorities, especially black people, have been oppressed in this country ever since they were forcibly brought here from Africa 400 years ago. And as a result, due to the dehumanization that came with the enslavement, the Jim Crow laws, which were a set of racist laws that were enacted after slavery was ended in 1865 to keep black people below whites on the social ladder, black people were repeatedly marginalized, murdered by extremist groups like the KKK, etc., and were subjected to all kinds of open racism from everyone. And as a result, black people themselves, due to illiteracy and mediocre access to education and social resources, were made to feel helpless and lost sight of the fact that they hold a large stake in the nation's well being due to their large population. As a matter of fact, the slave owners were so bad that when black slaves would sing songs to pass the time and forget their agony, the white slave owners would say, "Look, they're all singing, so they must be happy."
Wow.
When MLK and Malcolm X came along, they galvanized black people for the first time and made them realize that they had the same rights as everyone else and deserved to have access to those rights. In example, they realized the stakes that they had, and from there, we saw people begin to educate themselves en masse for the first time in America's history.
Yeah, and as you can see from his thoughts, it's really important to know history because
Yeah.
that's where you start learning about where these racial injustice and structural racism and
Comes from
yeah comes
to
from.
like really understand how to go about things.
Yeah.
Thank you, Yusuf.
All right.
Takwa from Germany says that history was never my favorite subject in school, but as I've grown older, I've started to realize how important it is to be educated on past events. We'll never be able to fully understand where a person is coming from until we have an idea of what they've been through. Didn't like history in school? That's okay. I'm not telling you to pull out a textbook or to read a book. Watch a documentary, look things up on YouTube, listen to podcasts. If you really want something, you will find a dozen ways. All you have to want right now is change and to be a part of that change.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Who
Yes,
liked
yes.
history in school?
In school, I did.
It depends on
How
the
I
teacher.
did.
Oh, in school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But history is a subject in itself is
Yeah.
really interesting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And she's super right. And it kind of relates. Like, Yusuf gave us all these information to make us understand more
Yeah.
clearly. And it's correct. She said that we have to get to know these things
And
because
you
it's really
can't,
important.
and you don't just have to get them from a full-on history textbook.
There's
a
so many
boring
resources
textbook.
now.
But yeah, there's so many.
Documentaries, movies.
But again, of course, you have to fact check.
I see a problem there that a lot of people, when they want to get educated, they see that as that huge task that's
Yeah.
so intimidating. But
Ah,
as Takwa says, you can do that in bite-sized pieces
Right.
and just watch a documentary here and there and listen to a podcast. That doesn't mean you have to change your entire life or your entire daily routine.
Exactly.
It's really something you can
but those
squeeze in
little
at any
things
time of
would
the day.
change your life.
It would, right? As a result.
the best part is when you start to get more and more of these bite-sized chunks until you get a full meal.
All right. We have Basil from Turkey. He said, I am talking about racialization, systematic racism, or just racism in general, how it significantly affects lives, how it started, and why it still affects people nowadays. I think if you guys talk about it, you wouldn't only help spread awareness, but also educate people, especially the younger generation. LOL, I sound like a 50-year-old boomer. No, you don't, by the way. There is this article, a short one, 5 to 6 pages, that covers this topic really well. I'm going to send it to you. And he did. I think it's good if you guys go through it and discuss some of the points that are mentioned in it. How I use whatever I have to help through the movement. Well, since I don't live in the US and I cannot protest here in Turkey, I use social media to spread awareness about the whole movement. I also like to join in online discussions about the movement, protests, and etc. I find a great way to learn and educate each other.
That's
So
really nice.
yeah, the article that he sent is entitled "Globalization and Racialization" by Manning Marable. Marable was an American professor of public affairs, history, and African American studies at Columbia University, and he founded and directed the Institute for Research in African American Studies. So it's a very interesting read.
Yeah. Thank you for that recommendation.
So yeah, if you can't physically be there to protest or to do something, you still have a lot of resources, online discussions, as he said, and and spread awareness through social media.
Well, my comment here would be that it's always a good idea to just look around and see where not just racism, but racialization happens, which is the first step towards racism. Like when you see a certain group of people and there's an obvious difference in like in terms of faith or in terms of looks, and you construct that biological idea of race, trying to naturalize the difference, that's always already the first step.
Next up, we have Aldrin from Saudi Arabia. He says, let yourself step out from your comfort zone. Try new things. Assess yourself and identify your weaknesses and strengths. Turn your weaknesses into strengths, and that's how you inspire others.
Beautiful, bruh.
Yeah. I
This
like
is a
that.
very like an inspirational talk kind of
Yes,
thing.
because it's really true that, and it really relates to what we have been saying, is that you have to be not comfortable.
Yes.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not saying it's easy.
It's not.
So
because
step
it's
out
not.
of your comfort zone and
the time that you start embracing the fact that you should be joining uncomfortable conversations, that's when you actually start learning
helping.
and helping. Yes.
Yeah, remember when I talked about this YouTube video, the My Story video, where African Americans were talking about their experiences as Black people in a community?
Yeah.
That was definitely uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
but that's
It's reality.
something. It's uncomfortable at first, but it's reality and helps you open your eyes a little more, I'd say.
Yes.
Yeah.
Alina from Sweden says, I think the single most important thing is to try and remember that you can always learn more and do more, even if it's just smiling to someone in a grocery store or if it's leading a demonstration. I try to educate myself by reading, watching, and listening as much as I can. It's hard sometimes because internet and social media can be overwhelming and include a lot of fake and exaggerated things. I think that every action and reaction you make and do forms not only you, but the people around you. Your choices are important, whether it's picking up litter on the street or standing up to a bully. In times like this, we need all the good actions and reactions we can get for the environment and for the human race.
Wow.
Hey,
that's beautiful, girl.
snaps.
Yeah, and as an educator, I always tell my students that it doesn't matter if it's just only you as a one person picking up your trash and putting it in trash can. If every one of you think the same way, it could reach 1 million.
And I really like the things she said about good actions and reactions.
And reactions.
Because you could be doing something that you think is not going to be affecting in any way, but sometimes it could affect really in a negative way, and you should be aware of that and make sure that everything you do could result in something good.
Yeah. It's not just about taking action, but also taking into consideration the consequences
And what happens after you do
after
that.
you do that certain action.
So Roma from Saudi Arabia says, racism is a century-long problem that persists through ages. While I was pondering how I educate myself from this pressing issue, it made me also wonder why this issue still prevails in a world where most societal paradigms shifted to a more accepting and more open outlook. Thinking that no matter what gender, regardless of age and nationality, our biological needs are the same. Thinking on how I educate myself about this issue made me ponder more what causes this to persist. We are fully aware of how damaging it is to the construct of society, yet it still happens. We see on a daily basis how this tears up the fabric of society, and yet we have to wait for a George Floyd to die just for us to cause an action. Sadly, I also blame myself for not taking the necessary course of action in solving this problem. In spite of that, I know that having this kind of mindset, this awareness, is already a big step to change our outlook on this issue and this eventually would cause positive change. However, I know it should not stop there because wishful thinking is not enough to create change. As an educator, I don't want to use my influence to my students by swaying them in my perspective, though I know that the issue requires drastic measure to create change. I know at the back of my mind that if I simply influenced my students with my mindset, I am not helping the situation to change. Instead, as an educator, what I can do is to impart what I know free from bias and let my students decide on the matter. Let them make their own course of action and support them in transgressing the issue.
Yes. Snaps again.
Good. Yeah. It's a very tricky tricky place when you're an educator because there's a fine line where am I influencing them and am I
being biased? with
being
my
biased
opinions?
or am I not being biased enough for them to grow up as good people? So there's always that question in mind
Right.
on where to put up the line.
And his
So-
point of that it had to take many people to
Die.
perish,
Yes.
for this to happen is unfortunate. And also that it's really nice that he is aware that he knows that he shouldn't just stop at having this, this mindset. He should also be more vocal and active.
When he said it should not stop there because wishful thinking is not enough.
Exactly.
And that's the
True.
reason why we're in this place, because people kept hoping for it to stop, wishing for it to stop, but not enough people are doing something about it.
Yeah, it's a responsible situation, especially as an educator, because you really have in fields like that or with topics like that, you'd really have to reflect on your bias, because not just if there is one, because there's always one, but what your bias is and what direction does it go and how does it affect your way of teaching.
Yeah.
Sultan from Canada. Just want to say this movement was a long time coming and it's so needed. Racism is alive and well all over the world, and for your question, to begin, it's important to understand your true self. Your unconscious bias, the social constructs that you grew up with, your values and beliefs. It's also important to read and be neutral and try to understand the situation more. There are so many books and articles regarding the oppression and marginalization of BIPOC worldwide. Social media can be a great outlet for inspiration and for resources. Just fact check them. It's important to talk about the issues and what's happening with your friends, family, and community. I personally try to alert my community how they can do better and move forward in an inclusive manner by speaking and shedding light on the underrepresentation and discrimination of BIPOC or Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So yeah, he's basically talking about integration versus integration versus inclusion, because it's two different things. When you say you're integrated, you're included there, but somehow there are still things that apply to others and does not apply to you. But if you're included, inclusion. It's like making sure that everyone is treated the same way in the society.
Okay,
And
so
he
you're
also
saying
mentioned-
if you're integrated, you're just part of it, but that's it, you're just part of it.
Yeah.
Whereas being
Right.
included would be getting mixed in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Saba from Jordan says, differentiate between prejudice, racism, and discrimination. I make sure to step in when I see any kind of discrimination, whether on social media or in real life. People have to also shed some light towards those facing the same kind of injustice in Palestine. I get people are fired up, but robbing stores for your own benefit won't solve racism or anything.
Good thoughts. Good thoughts. What do you guys think?
I agree. I like that she tells us to make sure to differentiate between discrimination, racism, and I agree. And make sure you step in when you see any kind of that, because again, your actions could cause really good or really bad reactions. But on the thought that yes, people are fired up, but robbing won't do good. It's true.
It's very true.
Everyone agrees, and everyone on the movement of the BLM movement agrees that robbing won't solve racism or anything, because that isn't the movement. The
Yeah.
margin of people doing that, people, first of all, you can take this two ways. First, yes, they're not part of the movement at all, and people that want to protest peacefully are there just to protest peacefully. And another way is that if people got to this point that they are rioting and they're very violent and they're very angry, I would say you can't blame the people that are very violent. Yes, violence is not,
The answer.
we're not
It's
condoning
not an answer
violence,
to anything.
but
What would you
because
say?
of countless peaceful protests with nothing resulting from that, a riot was bound to happen.
Would you say it's a little like this kid in school that gets constantly bullied, finally
Lashes out.
retaliates and beats up and lashes out, and then gets punished? Do you
Yeah.
think that dynamic has
Yeah.
I think in some
their
way.
parallels?
Yeah, I think in some way, yes, yes. But then, of course, again, that's still not an excuse. There's a
course
lot.
not,
There's
yeah.
a lot of layers into that because one, if that is not an excuse, like let's say for the kid who's getting bullied, if that's not an excuse for you to beat up the kid and
Yeah.
later on, what would you
Yeah.
do? Like for years and years you were bullied and you couldn't do anything about it. And that's the same thing with these people. Like they report, they try to protest,
And they protest peacefully
they
every
make it
time.
known to the world, and yet nothing happens. So
Right.
again, it's not an excuse to be violent, but it's also, I'd say, you can't 100%
This
blame
resulted
them.
from so many things that have happened.
That's
for
my take,
centuries.
but of course we have different takes on that.
And yeah, and making it clear again, if you look at everything that's been going on, a lot of the people that are protesting out there just want a peaceful protest.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
a few bad apples, if you will, are just taking the opportunity to steal and
Ooh.
loot.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and that's sad to say, but mainstream media wants us to believe that this whole protest is full of violence and riots. When in fact, if you look closely into the experiences firsthand of these people, you'd see that there are so many places where the protests are very peaceful.
And that the violence starts with the police.
Yes.
From that as well, she also mentioned that we should also shed light on some discriminations. The same type of discriminations going on in Palestine and everywhere around the world.
Everywhere
And
in the world. Yes.
yes, this movement, although it may be called Black Lives Matter, and it's focused on that right now because of what happened and what's been happening in the U.S., this movement would not only solve that.
Yeah.
Protests are going on around the world right now, and it's not exclusive to the fact that it's the U.S. We're eradicating racism and prejudice and discrimination.
And I think with this, what I'm seeing also is, which is a good thing, because from this protest and from what happened in the US, younger people are getting more and more aware of what's happening, not just in the US, but around the world.
In
And
their
not just
own
within the
community.
Black Lives Matter community or the Black community, but also, yes, in
And
their
that's really
community.
good. And yes, we should totally shed light on these topics on Palestine and China. You know, there's so
Yes.
many things going on there, and that is good to some extent. But when especially us, the younger generation, are too carried away with being very vocal, sometimes it could go the wrong way, and we
Right.
know that too
Yes.
well.
So we also have to be careful about that because I talked about this in the first part that we should not be putting them in one pot. There's still very different cases and there's separate cases, and that we should create change for them as well. But it's not like one issue for everybody. You know,
Well,
it's not like that.
Yeah. So I think maybe it would seem like my arguments contradict, but yes, this movement was for the Black Lives Matter movement, and I'm also saying that this movement would also affect people around the world to change their look on discrimination, prejudice, and racism alike. It's not that we're putting everything in one pot. It's just that we are hitting so many birds
Yes.
with this.
Yes, yes.
It's just one. It's just one among many that we can do.
Yeah, and we're asking people and we're trying to inspire people to create change in their own communities.
Yeah.
So it applies to any type of prejudice, racism, and discrimination that is
Yeah.
happening within our own communities.
And lastly, we have Aisha from the Philippines. She said, by keeping up to date with what's happening around us, we have the opportunity to change our views on cultural stereotypes and learn about what's happening and what matters to people.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Keeping up to date. That's really important. 'Cause,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're so comfortable with what we're doing. We're focusing on our own stuff that we forget what's actually happening in the world.
And she also mentioned that we have this opportunity right now. And like how I mentioned before is that if this movement was the one that got you to start, good. But it's something that
Okay.
we should have been doing from before. But now that this thing is going on and it's really big and it's a really good opportunity, take it and use it.
And the fact that we start reevaluating the past, the recent past, and see how it's actually so clear that we should have seen that way before. That's a good step.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a part of the reflective process, right?
I mean, don't blame yours. I mean, of course, there's a little bit guilt when you think, "Oh, why haven't I done anything before?" But get past that. Acknowledge that and say,
Right.
"Yes, I have done nothing."
And get on with it.
So therefore, do something now.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a part of the growing process.
Right.
Wailing and guilt just by itself, that would just be self-pity and
sad.
stupid and
Yeah.
not helpful
And-
at all. Yeah.
And because something there, like that's why people feel guilt, and that's why I have felt guilt before, is that sometimes you have so many urges, many opportunities and urges to say something or do something,
But
then
you
you
choose
then you
not to.
wait it out, and you're like, maybe there's a better time for this, which is wrong. As soon as possible is the best time.
Word.
It's also a great time right now to learn about things, to use and utilize the resources we've got for learning. You know, there's almost no excuse to be ignorant these days.
Yes. True. Very
And
true.
just like a favorite uncle of mine says, with great power comes great responsibility.
Aww.
So this thing we have is a power. Our tools are really powerful right now.
So that's that. Thank you so much for all those thoughts and comments. We really appreciate it, and we hope that you keep inspiring people, keep educating yourself, because it's high time that we do that.
So yeah, now that we have given you updates and kept you up to date and talked about history, privilege, and given you some suggestions on how to educate yourselves, and you also have given us suggestions. Now that we have done that and this 2-part learning through the movement may end, please continue to do everything after this. Continue to educate yourselves, keep having these conversations with people around you, on the dinner table, and with people close to you.
And while you're continuing to do all that, while you're educating yourself, you may also want to follow our Instagram. For example, at Hanajipuri for the lovely Hana, at Pt2 where Hamid shows off his art and writing skills, then at Aiko Heilig for me, where you can anticipate my first post
Oh,
that I'm going to post at some point. I don't know. Yay. We have Yaspuri for Yasin, and don't forget to check his YouTube account also. And most importantly, at the 4 Takeaway Podcast on Instagram for updates, announcement, and just plain old crew content. That's it for today's episode. Tune in next week to find out which takeaways we 4 weirdos have picked to talk about next. Hopefully that completes your order. Thanks for listening to
The 4 Takeaway Podcast.
Would you like that for dining?
or for takeaway.
For takeaway.